Hi, okay, so today we're going to talk about finishing up ratios, so some of the AO3, AO4 points that you might use for ratios, and then we're going to move on to labor performance ratios, okay? So we're going to work into a presentation. I'm going to say pause the video and do this or do that or calculate this or calculate that. So please work along with the video at your own pace and go through it properly. If I say pause, then pause and think about what I've asked you to do. Okay, so we're going to start off today with a question. So why is ratio analysis important for businesses to undertake? So basically, what are the general benefits of using ratio analysis? And by ratio analysis, I mean the 6 ratios that we've looked at in the previous 2 lessons. So gross profit margin, profit for the year margin, ROCE, gearing ratio, acid test ratio, and current ratio. Okay, so let's have a look at some general points that you might be able to use in an exam question. So obviously we can make comparisons to the competition. You did that in the previous task where you were comparing Goals PLC against Power League PLC, and then you could clearly see that apart from the gearing ratio, Goals PLC was a much more effective business. It had higher margins, it had better liquidity, it had a higher ROCE. So apart from their level of debt, they were performing better than the competition. You can make comparisons to the previous years. That's really common, and I think that's more likely what you would be doing in an exam question, is that they would give you 2 or 3 or 4 years worth of data, and then you'd be looking for trends. What's going up, what's going down, and what are the reasons for that. So we can produce time series data and have a look at trends. Is ROC going up? Is ROC going down? Why might that be the case? Obviously, we can measure the performance and effectiveness of strategies. So the strategy this year was X, a merger, a takeover, releasing a new product, whatever the strategy was. How has that affected our ratios? So we can use it to assess the effectiveness of our strategies and measure performance. And that from there, we can make future objectives that can lead to further strategies. And obviously, we can show them to stakeholders for finance and for information. Okay, so that's the general uses of our ratio analysis. Just like you did with the goals, the goals PLC case study, where you were evaluating how well Goals PLC was doing. Okay. So second part then, obviously we need to know the kind of AO4s, the problems, the limitations, the weaknesses of ratio analysis. So pause for a minute and have a think. What are some of the issues with ratio analysis? Okay, so let's have a quick chat about these points then. So obviously using them in isolation is not that useful. So just looking at one data series isn't going to be that useful. We need several years worth of data. If you've only got 2 or 3 years worth of data, you could question, well, we really need to see 5 or 10 years worth of data to really look at trends and have a look at how the business is performing. Is it on an upward swing, a downward swing, that kind of thing? And obviously, we're going to need to compare it against several competitors if that's what we're trying to do, okay? It doesn't take into account any qualitative factors, so maybe margins have gone down, maybe ROCE has gone down, but that's because the business is trying to be green, or maybe they are growing rapidly, or maybe they've just entered a new country. So there's no account or explanation of why the data's changed. That would require further research from the business themselves. So maybe it's okay if liquidity is a little bit low and margins have fallen if they've just done a major strategy of taking over a competitor, okay, or entering a new market or releasing a new product range. Then in the short term, a dip in these numbers might be okay, but just looking at the numbers doesn't take that into account. Very similar with external factors. So maybe the ROCE's fallen, maybe the profit margin's fallen, maybe even liquidity's fallen, but that's because the whole economy's struggling. Okay, so Hong Kong at the minute is in a recession because of the protests and now the virus. So many businesses' margins and profits will be falling, but that's really to be expected because of the tough business conditions at the minute. Okay, so again, there's no explanations behind the numbers, it's just raw numbers. There are some calculation issues. I wouldn't use this in an exam answer because I think it's not a solid answer. But there are slightly different methods of calculating these, of calculating capital employed and different things and different accounting methods. But I think it's a bit of a cheat point. I wouldn't rely on this too heavily. And this last one's quite good though, perhaps. Some of the results, particularly the liquidity measures, could be window dressed. And by window dressed, that doesn't mean falsifying the data. That means that you are doing techniques to try and make them appear better than they are. So maybe delaying a major purchase until the next financial year so it doesn't show up on your liabilities. Maybe selling off an asset to suddenly boost liquidity in order to make the business appear healthier than it actually is. Or maybe valuing stocks. Okay, so maybe overvaluing of stocks could also increase your liquidity somewhat. But really, it's a window dressing method to make the numbers appear better than they actually are. Okay? I think what I'll do now is start a new video for HR performance because I feel like this video is going to get really, really long, and I think it's a good place to finish is with the ratio AO3, AO4 general points. Okay?